Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm going to start now, inshallah. Just before I begin properly, just a quick apology on my side of things. For the past 2 weeks, I've been very, very ill. So I haven't had time to properly put the time and energy into this session. But this session is going to be our final session on Imam Bukhari. Some of you, I think, missed a couple of sessions, so it's going to be a bit all over the place for you. However, I'm pretty much going to pick up where I left off. So that will be with Imam Bukhari's encounter with Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhali. So I'll recap quickly over that situation. So this was with the Abbasid dynasty, the Abbasid Khilafah. And during this period, the Khalifa Al-Ma'mun propagated an Islamic belief system or theology that opposed Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember when I told you about the Mu'tazila?
Oh, yeah.
You remember the Mu'tazila? Okay, so the issue that was there was, is the Quran created or not? And then Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal, he fought for Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and stated that the Quran is not created. The Quran is the speech of Allah, and all of the attributes and that are connected to Allah are they are not uncreated. Okay? So the Quran itself, being the speech of Allah, Kalamullah, is not created. So then the next fitna that arose was, okay, if the speech of Allah if the Quran is not created, what about when you and me recite the Quran? What then? Is that created? So that arose a lot of controversy and a lot of issues within the Ummah over that. And the example that basically Imam Bukhari said, what Imam Bukhari said on the issue was that the Quran is not created, but the actions of man are created. So therefore our utterance is created. So the example that we gave from Shaykh Yasir Qadi, his example, which I think is the best illustration, was when I said to you guys, who said to be or not to be? And you guys all said Shakespeare. I said, no, I'm saying it. So that is the same way that the Quran is, our utterance is created, but the Quran itself is not created. Does everyone understand that? Okay. So to recap briefly and quickly over what happened in the situation. So Imam Bukhari came to Bukhara, his hometown. Naishapur, which is close to his hometown. Yeah, and the Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhali, he was the main sheikh of that town. He was the leader. He was the leading scholar of that town. So many people were happy to see Imam Bukhari come into the town. The author of Sahih al-Bukhari, and he was a very famous man, just almost as famous as he is today. So the people were excited for him to come. People were throwing all sorts of processions for him to come. There was 15 kilometers of people lining up just to meet him as he came to the town. And Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhali was one of these people, so he invited him. So I said, over time things arose, and someone asked him about the situation of the utterance of the Quran, and he gave the statement of the actions. The Quran is not created, but the actions of man are created. So then that led people to raise doubts about him. Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhali was jealous of Imam Bukhari, which ultimately rose in him propagating against him and speaking against him and telling people you can't sit with Imam Bukhari. Previously, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So previously people were encouraged to sit, Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhali, he encouraged people to sit with Imam Bukhari. So he'd say, go study with him, go study with him. Now he's saying, don't study with this man, he's an innovator. He is a mubtadi, he is a man of bid'ah, a man of heresy, innovation. Afterwards, he noticed that Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhali's best student, Imam Muslim, had gone to Imam Bukhari. So Imam Muslim was both sitting with Imam Bukhari and Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhali. So one day when Imam Muslim was in the circle of Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli made an announcement. He said, whoever sits with Imam Bukhari is a man of bid'ah, and they should not be sitting with us. So Imam Muslim, he got up, left the circle, put his cloak on, put his imamah on, and left the circle. He then called his servant to collect all the hadith that he had written down, that he collected from Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. And then he put it on top of a donkey and sent it back to him, backwards, which was a huge disrespect. That's the biggest kind of disrespect you would have in that time period. What they used to do, if you committed certain sins, or you were behaving in a socially unacceptable way, what they'd do is they'd strip you naked, tie you backwards to a donkey, and tell the donkey to ride, and send it through the streets to publicly embarrass you. And as we know, generally a donkey is seen as something lowly and something that an animal that doesn't have a lot of respect. So that's what Imam Muslim done to the hadith that he collected from Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, and he sent that donkey to the door of Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. So after this event, various other things. So now we're going to go more into the final stages of Imam Bukhari's life and what happened towards the end. So Imam Bukhari, after this whole incident with Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, all of his students left him. All of his students, except for two people. Imam Muslim and Ahmed ibn Adam. So Ahmed ibn Adam is quite an important name, so remember it. So what happened is, after this, the people asked Imam Bukhari to leave Naysapur. So then Imam Bukhari went back to his hometown of Bukhara. And the Amir of Bukhara, Khalid ibn Ahmed, said to him, I want you to teach me Sahih Bukhari. I want you to narrate the hadith so I can become a collector of the hadith. So I can be in the chain, so I can be a student. Yeah. So Imam Bukhari said, so he said to him, come teach me privately in the palace. So Imam Bukhari said, no, I won't disgrace my knowledge, and I won't humiliate knowledge by carrying it to the doors of the rulers. So then the Amir, Khalid ibn Ahmed, said, okay, teach my sons. Make a private class for my sons. And then he said, no, why should, if people want to have knowledge, they should come to it. Tell them to come to my circles. And then he said, okay, at least allow my sons to sit at the front. And he said, no, your sons can sit like everyone else. So obviously that caused many problems for Imam Bukhari in terms of his social, political standing now. So then what else happened after that was Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli's jealousy is now spreading across the town, the area, and the Amir, Khalid ibn Ahmed, hears of this. So Muhammad ibn Yahya's fatwa against Imam Bukhari reaches the Amir, and the Amir uses this to push Imam Bukhari out of Bukhara. So he literally, imagine, being kicked out of your hometown. It's not the nicest of experiences. This is the place you grew up. This is the place you knew. This is the place where your mother and father raised you. And Imam Bukhari was kicked out. So before Imam Bukhari left on this from Bukhara, he made a dua. So he said, "O Allah, show in themselves and in their families what they intended for me." So a month later, after that dua, the Amir that kicked Imam Bukhari out, he was kicked out of Bukhara. He was exiled. And Imam Bukhari left Bukhara and went to Samarkand. And then it was during this journey that he had some issues with the people of Samarkand. So he went to the town, and the people, they were unsure whether to let him in, because the people were split into two groups. One group saying, Imam Bukhari is amazing, he's Imam Bukhari, how can we not let him in? And the other group saying, we heard about this thing with the creation of the Quran and the utterance, and we heard these things from Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. And then the Amir is saying, look what happened with the last Amir, do I really want to do this? So this happened for a few months, and eventually the people said to Imam Bukhari, yes, we want you to enter the city. But Imam Bukhari, now he's tired. People are abusing him, he's been kicked out of his hometown. He said, no, I don't want to enter your city. And this was a very sad time for Imam Bukhari. So what he done is, he made dua he said, I can't remember the exact wording. He said, oh Allah, the earth has become a small place for me. The earth is no longer vast for me. So if it is my time, then please, and it is best for me, then take my life. Now, that's an interesting point in and of itself, because in the Quran, Allah states a prohibition of making dua for taking for death. If you make dua for death, that's actually prohibited. But Imam Bukhari knew, because he has these hadith in his Sahih al-Bukhari, that there is a hadith that states, if fitna is getting too much for me, so the fitna of the world is causing you too many troubles, then in this situation where you feel you're being tested too much and you can't handle it anymore, now it's halal for you to make that dua. But obviously, you're not allowed to take your own life, but you can ask Allah for ease. And if that's the means of ease, then so be it. But it's the same situation with Ali radiallahu anhu. When he was the Amir, the people of Khurasan gave him so many troubles. They were the majority of them were the Khawarij. Some of them were robbing his house. They were very abusive to him. So he made this dua as well. Ali radiallahu anhu made this dua, and later we find out that Ali radiallahu anhu was assassinated. So Imam Bukhari made this dua, and after Isha, on Saturday, the night of Eid al-Fitr, Imam Bukhari passed away. So I told you to remember this name, yeah? Ibn Adam, he was the student of Imam Bukhari. He said, I had a dream, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I said to the messenger, and he was with his companions, and I said to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And he said, Assalamu alaikum. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Wa alaikum salam, and he said that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I'm here waiting for my companion. So Ibn Adam, he didn't know what that dream meant. He didn't know what it entailed. So after he woke up from that dream, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. After he woke up from that dream, 5 to 6 days later, he realized Imam Bukhari had died. And he realized the night that he had that dream was the same night that Imam Bukhari died. So, in conclusion, that's pretty much the ending of Imam Bukhari's life. I know people like stories, so I thought I'd add a quick story in. The ulama that have a great standing in Islam they seem to have weird deaths. Very, very weird deaths. Like, I find Imam Muslim's death very, very weird. So, one day, Imam Muslim was debating. So the scholars of hadith, what they used to do is, they used to gather together and they used to debate hadith. Who had more hadith? They used to debate the chains of narration and debate, is this person acceptable or unacceptable? So one day, Imam Muslim, he was in a debate, and a man mentioned a sahih hadith that he didn't have in his memory. So Imam Muslim became very angry, not that someone had more knowledge than him, but because he hadn't collected it. Like, he was angry with himself. So Imam Muslim went home, went straight to his book. So every scholar of hadith has a master copy of where they write down their hadith, but they keep them memorized as well. But they have something to refer to. So, by the way, actually I'll tell you this after. So that day, someone gave Imam Muslim's family a basket full of dates. So Imam Muslim was in his library. He said to his wife and his family, look, don't disturb me. I'm in my room, in my study room, my library. Whilst I'm in here, do not give me food, do not give me water, don't even come in until I come out. So after a few hours, his wife became a bit concerned. He's been in there for hours, he hasn't even eaten. So he said, so the wife came in with the dates. So Imam Muslim accepted the dates and he said, okay, I'll have them. So he was reading through his things, his notes, and he was eating the dates. He ate the whole basket. That was like 2 tons worth of dates. He ate so many dates because he was so lost in his books, just searching for that hadith. He didn't realize that he had ate too much. He actually died from overeating on dates because he was so lost in his work. Now, I know that sounds a bit weird and a bit confusing, but when you look at it in context, it goes to show how important knowledge was for these people. That they could be reading something and they don't realize they're killing themselves from eating too much food. It's the same with Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he used to live with his mum. Ibn Taymiyyah, he wasn't married. He never married. So he used to live with his mum, and his mum used to, whilst he was writing books, his mum used to bring him the food and things. And sometimes he was so lost in his books that his mum had brought him food and he was reading and eating. And at the end of the day, when he'd finished, he'd say to his mum, Mum, why didn't you give me any food? Why didn't you bring me any food? So he didn't even realize that he had eaten food, even because he was so lost in his work. So the ulama, the true ulama, Jazakallah khairan, the true ulama, that's their passion for knowledge. It's called tunnel vision. When you're so lost in a thing that you don't even notice the world around you. And for them, that was what their passion was. That's where their sweetness was. When you love something, it's everything to you. You get lost in it. And that's what the ulama, the true ulama, are. They are lost in their knowledge. So, just some final things. Imam Bukhari, he wrote Sahih al-Bukhari over a period of 16 years. 5 of the years he wrote it in Basra, and in the last year he wrote it in Medina. So each hadith that he placed into Sahih al-Bukhari had various things it had to go through. He had a very unique criteria. I think I can't remember if I mentioned it in the first or the second session. I think it was in the second, that he wanted to prove that the 2 people actually met. Now, I know you're thinking like, well, you expect them to be me. Every hadith, each narrator should have met. But the fact of the matter is, yes, they have met, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to have narrated the hadith from each other. But to actually have empirical evidence of them meeting is incredibly hard. To actually go through history books to find so and so and so and so were in this town, in this village, at the same time, and they would have met, is an incredibly hard thing to prove. Generally, we know if a person is upright, he is practicing, and he is acting upon that hadith himself, and he is known as a good narrator, why would he lie? But that's the general rule of hadith, that you take their word for it. But for Imam Bukhari, that's not enough. Imam Muslim said that that condition was extremism. And a lot of the scholars said that, if it wasn't for the greatness of Imam Bukhari, that task itself would have been impossible. To have collected so many ahadith to that condition and put them in. One of the other conditions is that Imam Bukhari, before placing a hadith into his Sahih al-Bukhari, he would perform wudu, a fresh wudu for each hadith, and pray istikhara. So I can't remember the exact number of singular hadith without repetition. I believe it was around 1,800 to 1,500, and that's the number of hadith without repetition.
3,000, I think.
Was it 3,000? Okay. Yeah, it's about 8,000 in total, 3,000. Yeah, sorry. 3,000 ahadith, and that's without the repetition. So sometimes there's a long hadith, and what Imam Bukhari would do is he would cut that hadith, because in the first part of the hadith it might have a ruling for salah, then later hunting, and then later an explanation of a verse of the Quran. And what he would do is he'd split that up and put it into different sections, so it rolls up to about 8,000 narrations, even though some of them were repeats. So that was 3,000 wudus, 3,000 istikhara for that book. So imagine the barakah that was in that book, and it was written in Medina by the side of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grave. So, you know, when I started this series of talks, I didn't think I would do Imam Bukhari in 3 sessions. Like, I was actually planning this to be, you know, the first session we done on social Islam. This was meant to be the filler. This was meant to be the ending, but it turned into be 3 sessions. And to be honest and quite frank about it, this was a very brief and summarized account of Imam Bukhari's life. He's an amazing person and an amazing personality, and these 3 sessions haven't truly done justice towards him. But now to go on to why we've been doing this. Why did we bother to look at the life of Imam Bukhari? First and foremost is we all need to know who our real role models are. On the first session, I asked the young man who was sitting on my left, you know, who's someone you look up to? And he was, Messi, that was it, Messi. He said, football player, Messi. So I said to him, you know, you need to learn the real heroes, the real people you need to look up to. So that's why we need to mention these people and have more lectures on it. There are like the Seerah lectures that I attend on the other weeks. Everyone should be attending them. You need to be going to your homes, bringing your cousins, your friends, your nephews, your women, children, etc. You need to be. Everyone needs to know the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he is our major role model. Imam Bukhari and the Sahaba, they are sub-role models to him, because they base their lives on him. So we need to know our role models, because we need to know who to look up to. And although it is impossible for us to achieve the status of the Sahaba or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's that saying, you know, if you aim for the stars, you'll get in the, I don't know the saying properly, but if you aim for the stars, you're going to get pretty high. So if these are the people that you base your life around and you aim to achieve and be like, you will get far in your deen. But it's when we base ourselves and choose for ourselves role models that, what do they promote other than everything that contradicts Islam, that we as Muslims have problems. And there are big problems in Muslim society. You know, it's my personal opinion that from a historical point of view, Muslims are the 21st century Jews. So from a historical understanding of what the Jews were in the Bible, in the Old Testament and in the Quran, how they were described of Moses, Musa alayhi salam, giving them a law, and then them constantly questioning and disobeying and saying, but what about this, what about that? That's our lives today. This is the situation of the Muslims, that, you know, it's not, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, the believers are those that say, Sami'na wa ata'na, we hear and we obey. And very few Muslims have that mentality. It's, but what about this situation? Is this halal for me? You know, like, I'm going to pick on the sisters. You know, a lot of sisters ask, can I do my eyebrows? What extent can I do my eyebrows? You know, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the woman who plucks her eyebrows is cursed. So now it's like, okay, but what actually constitutes as the eyebrow? Yeah? Now I'm going to pick on you guys, because soon you're going to have this problem of the beard. You're going to be like, okay, so where does the beard end? What can I shave and what can't I shave? Can I just trim it a little bit? Yeah, is, you know, where can I, like, what can I play with? That mentality, if you look at the story of the of the Jews and the she-camel. When they were like, oh, was it a cow or a camel? Cow. Yeah, so the cow. They're like, what color? What color? What size? What, etc., 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 etc. Asking more and more questions. They're making their life more difficult. So in that sense, Muslims have become the 21st century historical Jews. Yeah, and in the other sense, I honestly believe that we've disgraced ourselves and distanced ourselves so badly from the Quran that we're earning Allah's wrath upon us, and we're earning disgrace by not following Islam. Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu said that the Arabs were given honor through Islam, and were we to take it away, we would lose all honor. If you look at our situation, we've removed that honor from ourselves by removing Islam from ourselves. And it's for that reason that what happened with the Jews and the Holocaust looks like it's going to happen to us very soon. And I think the only real way to prevent that is by returning that honor to ourselves, by actually following the deen as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam brought, by actually following its rulings, by actually abiding by it, and having a level of zuhud, a level of forsaking the dunya. Now, forsaking the dunya doesn't mean you throw away your TV, you throw away your sofas, and you get rid of designer clothes. Because let me tell you of a type of zuhud that a lot of people won't know is zuhud. Yeah? You know, you have to be a zahid. Yeah? A person of zuhud. So, Imam Abu Hanifa, he took it upon himself to wear very, very expensive clothing. Like he wore the modern day Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Prada clothing. Yeah, he had what's designer thobe? Lamar thobes. They're like them £1,000 thobes. Yeah, that's what Imam Abu Hanifa wore. It's not because he had extravagance. It's not because he wanted to show off. But he saw, I am a scholar. I need to present myself as a scholar. And at the same time, he thought, you should never dress down. You should never dress below yourself. Dress within your means. If you have the means to dress good, you need to dress good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, speak of the favors of your Lord. And he interprets this verse to mean that dressing well is as if you're speaking of the favors of your Lord. That in and of itself is a type of zuhud. What happens is, the difference is, having a lot of money can be zuhud if you use it in the right way. But when you make your life to get money, that's when you've transgressed the bounds and left zuhud, and now you're talking dunya. Now your life is dunya. What we need to do is get back to making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the center and focal point of our lives. What we need to be aiming and achieving towards is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, to help us in this, we need to have the correct role models. Another reason why we look at the life of Imam Bukhari is because the series of lectures are centered around this book, Al-Adab al-Mufrad. And Imam Bukhari, as you can see, is the author of this book. So it's always good to know who wrote the book you're reading. And the other part is, it's always nice to see how amazing an individual he was. Because all of us have heard the name Imam Bukhari, but how many people knew the things that were said in this series, and unfortunately the things that we didn't get to mention due to time constraints. The next reason is because so many lessons can be derived from Imam Bukhari's life, and I want to just go through this quickly on the board because I enjoyed writing on the board last week. So this is pretty much what I'm going to do now is basically the ultimate practical summary for Imam Bukhari for each and every single one of us in this room. What do we take from Imam Bukhari holistically that we can put in? So every Muslim needs to have a goal. So, someone tell me, what's the goal of every Muslim?
To get to
Yeah, to Jannah. Yeah? So, to achieve Jannah, we need to have a means to get to Jannah. So, we need to have aims. And to achieve our aims, we need objectives, yeah? So, I didn't know this until I was writing this up, the difference between an aim and an objective, yeah? An aim is your goal, yeah? An aim is what you want to achieve. Is the end product. And an objective is the means to doing it. So, to come here today was my aim, and my objective was to wake up, get dressed, leave the house, catch a train, and walk here. Yeah, so aims. So there's objectives. Then from your objectives, so now you have your aims, so your goal, the aims. Now your aims are the things that you want to do to achieve your goal, and your objectives are the means of achieving your aims. And to figure out what your aim is, you need to figure out two things. Your talents and what your passion is in life. So, Imam Bukhari, he knew that he had an amazing memory. And he knew from his father, that who collected hadith and was a small scholar of hadith, that he had a passion and love for a hadith. So, what Imam Bukhari done was, he knew that he had the potential for becoming a muhaddith, for becoming a scholar of hadith. And his aim was to please, his goal was to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get to Jannah. And pleasing Allah is an aim. And one of the objectives of that is to become a scholar. Yeah? So in his objectives was, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, those that fear Allah most are the ulama. So from that, he wanted to become a scholar. He knew he wanted to become a scholar of hadith because of his talents and passions. And what he wanted to do then to truly stand out was his As-Sahih Al-Bukhari. Now, what everyone else needs to do is you need to figure out these two. You know what this is. You just need to figure out the in-between and how you can use these to achieve that. That is the holistic and summarized and made universal summary of Imam Bukhari's life and what we can learn from it. So, especially you guys, take that on board, learn what your talents and passions are, and use them for the sake of this deen to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's one of the lessons of Imam Bukhari's life. There's one thing, I'll save that towards the end. There was something I was going to mention earlier during the thing, but I completely forgot when I was talking about the thing. Yeah, I'll just forget about it. Yeah.
It's about the thing that you forgot.
Yeah, it was that forget about that thing. So, yeah. The other lesson of Imam Bukhari is that many of us have this misconception when it comes to Islam. And many of us, we just seem to go to extremes. You'll get one person that's like, like they don't pray very much, and they're like, it's not about praying, it's about being a good person. If you're not a good person, like, so what if you pray and you're not a good person and you're rude to people? And you'll get the other extreme, mashallah, big beard, prays in the masjid 5 times a day, everything, he's doing everything. He's reading Quran after salah, he's doing his dhikr, comes home and he's like, is this what you cook me? And then he's just rude to his wife, rude to his kids. No, you need to, that's another extreme. So the point is that Imam Bukhari implemented the religion of Islam completely. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, enter this religion, how was it worded? Completely, enter it wholly. You have to accept all of it. Don't pick and choose what you're going to be doing. Islam is your actions and your there's, like I remember I said in the first lecture, I said Islam being separated into the three categories of Iman, Fiqh and Ihsan. Fiqh can be split into two categories. Those actions that you do for the pleasure of Allah, so like directly towards Allah, and those interactions and dealings with mankind. And upon those actions and dealings of mankind is your manners. So you need to enter Islam completely, both with your ibadah and your manners. Don't be a half Muslim where you're praying but you're being rude. So one person, they're not very practicing at all, and I would say they're very close to leaving Islam, almost. And they said, why, the person lives in East Ham. They said, so many Muslims on a day-to-day basis, when I'm getting on the bus, they just barge past me and rush on the bus and push me to the side. But when I'm in Canary Wharf and all the non-Muslims are there, they make orderly queues and they say, do you want to get on, etc. Why don't we have that? Why, I saw this post on the other day. When you go to a masjid and the shoes are just all over the place, and they showed a picture of these Buddhist monks, and their shoes were so nicely stacked and put into a good order. No one's going to lose their shoes. And people wonder why people look at non-Muslims look at us as if we're a joke. We talk the talk, but we don't walk the walk. We have give that classical example, statement of when a non-Muslim asks about Islam, we're like, don't judge Islam by the people. Read the Quran. Come on, how shameful is that we have reached that stage, that we have to say, judge the Quran. During the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was no written Quran. The Quran was in their lives. The Sahaba, they used to go to areas and they couldn't speak the language. The people converted to Islam just by looking at their behavior. And now we're saying, okay, so brother, don't watch this YouTube lecture and read this book and these select chapters of the Quran, and read Hamza, watch Hamza Zotzi's video of the proof of God. Yeah, please, brother, don't look at Ahmed down the road. Don't ignore him. Yeah, ignore him. My dad's not Muslim. Yeah, he said to me one day, I won't say the Muslim's name. He said to him, when so my dad's Sikh. Yeah, so he goes, such and such person who's my dad's friend who's a Muslim, said he came to the temple and bowed his head. I was like, whoa. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, he's like, so why won't you celebrate Diwali? I'm like, okay, look. So we need to kind of work on things quite badly. So this is why we're going to go into the Al-Adab Al-Mufrad. So you and I can go on a journey together of learning these prophetic mannerisms and the mannerisms of the Sahaba and the early generations. So inshallah we can implement them into our lives. And also, not just for us to implement into our lives, and also to share with other people. Not by saying, Salamu alaikum brother, Salamu alaikum sister, what you're doing is wrong. Don't talk to people like that. But teach them by acting. Teach them by doing. Because people will love you when you have good manners. Good manners are the things that beautify a person. I was with a Sheikh a few days ago, Sheikh Akram Nadawi, who's a Hanafi scholar who I have a lot of respect for. And I was with him from about 10 a.m. to about 6 p.m. And so it's quite a long time. That's 8 hours. Yeah. So I was with 8 hours with him, and I had a whole load of conversations. We're talking about Aqidah, Wasatiyah. We're going through all these books, talking about Ibn Taymiyyah, and everything we're discussing. He's not that impressed with anything I'm saying. He's not that impressed. And then I said one thing, and then he became. He said, MashaAllah, that's a beautiful statement. I'm going to use that in my lecture, and I'm a bit happy about that. Because if you don't know Sheikh Akram Nadawi, he's an amazing man. So I got a bit happy about that. So I'm going to repeat the statement for you, and I think it's important and it truly sheds light on our situation today. I said, so many people in this ummah run towards aqidah. Like aqidah is our sole goal or something. It's aqidah, people run to it, when really we should be running towards adab. Because if we run towards adab, adab will be the thing that unites Muslims, because it wouldn't matter if someone's has a deviant belief system or they're a person of bid'ah, because if your adab are good, they'll actually listen to what you have to say. You know, I don't know if you've seen that YouTube video of the guy who's like, it's quite funny when the guy's like, when the sister calls and goes, are we allowed to call them wobblers? Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen that one. It's quite funny, but if you look at that situation, all that displays is bad adab. He disrespects another group's beliefs. She most likely wasn't of his particular belief system, was calling him for a bit of a joke. But if we actually had respect with them and showed them some adab, they wouldn't have that disrespect. Likewise. And the same with non-Muslims. If we actually had the proper correct adab and respect, they wouldn't hate Muslims so much. It's when non-Muslims live with practicing Muslims, it's these non-Muslims that are the ones that start defending Islam against those who are the enemies of Islam. So the other lesson we can take from Imam Bukhari's life is that society for our sins and failures as Muslims is really not an excuse. Like I said in the beginning of the series, was Imam Bukhari's socio-political situation when he was growing up and the times that he lived were hardly any different to our times. There was a growth of knowledge and there was all sorts of sins flying around. People were drinking alcohol openly in his hometown. There was the Abbasids spreading the Mu'tazila theology. There's no excuse for us because we live in the same times. I mentioned the hadith of the hot coal that people like to use as a, brother, don't judge me, hot coal and like it's difficult times. No, Imam Bukhari had worse times. In Imam Bukhari's times, if you said the beliefs of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, you got imprisoned. Look what happened to Imam Ahmed. Look what happened to Imam Malik. Imam Malik said a fatwa that said, I can't remember exactly, it was if the Khalifa issues an order, do you have to obey it it was to do with marriage. But ultimately what it related to was, if you haven't given your bay'ah to the Khalifa, you don't have to obey him. Yeah, that was indirectly what the fatwa meant. So the Khalifa actually shaved the beard of Imam Malik, shaved his head, stripped him naked and tied his arms to a caravan, the back of horses, and he rode it through the streets of Medina. So this is Imam Malik being dragged through the streets of Medina, naked, with his beard shaven and his head shaven, all because he stood up for the truth. And now, what excuse do we have? Are you telling me that I'm not saying you guys, but how can anyone say that our society is hard? Fair enough. Things are getting harder now. You have to make sure the things that you say aren't interpreted in the wrong way. But ultimately, you still have relative freedom of practice. You have no one telling you to sin. No one's telling you to drink alcohol, have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or to do this or to do that. No one's telling you to do these things. You have complete freedom in not committing certain sins. Yet we still have the society excuse. So that's one lesson from the life of Imam Bukhari. And the final lesson that before bringing up the book, is Imam Bukhari of his 1,080 teachers that he took from, each and every single one, he checked what their beliefs were, what their practices were, and were they upon the truth. So he didn't study under a man that didn't say Iman is in the heart, on the tongue, and in the actions, which is the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. He didn't study under a man that said otherwise. He made sure that his scholars were upon the truth. And sorry, I told you I was quite ill. But the next part is, I'm going to read it from this book. That's the life of Imam Bukhari. Basically what happened was, a person called Al-Walid came to Imam Bukhari and said, what does it take to become a scholar? What does it take to become a muhaddith? So Imam Bukhari said, "O my son, do not embark upon an endeavour until you know its limits, and until you know the talents that will be required of you in order for you to succeed at it. And know that a man does not truly and completely become a scholar of hadith until he writes down 4 things, with 4 things. With 4 things, and the example of 4 things, until he writes during 4 stages, until he writes in 4 conditions, until he writes in 4 places, until he writes down on 4 things, and until he writes down from 4 things of 4 kinds of people. And when he does all of that, 4 things will become easy for him. And also, he will be tested in 4 things. And if he remains patient throughout those tests, Allah will honour him with 4 things and reward him with 4 things in the hereafter." Oh, okay. When I read this the first time, I was thinking, what are these 4 things? And there's so many 4 things. Imam Bukhari later explains. So, Imam Bukhari later went on to say, one must write down the narrations when one is young, when one reaches an age of understanding, during the years of one's young adulthood, and during one's middle years. One must write down narrations and preoccupy oneself with knowledge under 4 conditions: when one is busy, when one is free, when one is poor, and when one is rich. And one must write down on the tops of mountains, when travelling by sea, in the cities and the desert. And one must write down narrations and knowledge on 4 things: on stones, shells, leather, and on shoulder bones, until the time comes when one is able to write them onto paper. And one must write down from 4 kinds of people: those who are above him, those who are below him, those who are at his level, as well as from the book of his father. But he has to be sure that he is transcribing from the actual handwriting of his father and not the handwriting of someone else. Furthermore, one must strive to do 4 things: to seek out knowledge, to seek only the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to act in accordance with the book of Allah, to spread knowledge amongst students, and to author works so as to keep one's remembrance alive after one's death. Imam Bukhari then went on to say, and one will not accomplish these without 4 things that he, as a slave of Allah, must inquire himself: knowledge of the book of Allah, language, so he talks about sarf and nahwa, which sarf is morphology and nahwa is grammar. Yeah. And then one will need 4 things that are from the gifts of Allah: health, ability, meaning talent, a strong drive to learn, and a retentive memory. If one is blessed with all of these things, 4 things will become easy for him. I.e., they will come insignificant in his eyes compared to his great purpose in life: his family, children, wealth, and homeland. And one will be tested in 4 things: enemies who find satisfaction in his failures and mistakes, friends who find fault with him, ignorant people who level accusations against him, and scholars who become jealous of him. If he remains patient through all of these tests, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will honour him with 4 things in this world: with the honour of becoming content with one's life, with the aura of awe one inspires into others through one's profound deep faith, with the sweet satisfaction of knowledge, and with an eternal life. And Allah will reward him with 4 things in the hereafter. And we'll just leave it here because it's getting. You want to know more? Okay. So Allah will reward him with 4 things in the hereafter, with the option of interceding for whomsoever he wants from his Muslim brothers, with being blessed with the shade of the throne on the day of judgment, with being able to drink from the river of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and with being in the company of the prophets in the highest levels of paradise. So, just to sum all of that up, although there's a lot, there's 4 things. 1, all of that basically is Imam Bukhari's life summarized in about 2-3 paragraphs. Second, he's trying to say that, look, you need to have dedication in your life. You need to, if you want to achieve something, work hard, study. So he's saying study when you're young, have these ambitions and work on them. Then he was going on to say that you need to be writing no matter what your condition is. If you're at sea, work. If you're on the top of mountains, work. And don't be ignorant and pride-filled, that you won't study under those at your level or below you, or take from what your parents have, take from their knowledge, and take from the people above you. And he was saying, write on anything you can find, meaning don't use poverty as an excuse. If you don't have the material, go find any material, and then work when you're rich, you're poor, you're healthy, and you're unwell. Why? Because regardless of these conditions, that's not an excuse. If you really want something, you should be striving persistently to get it. And the trials, and if the knowledge of the Quran and the Arabic, that means you need to, if you're going to be going into a field, you need to learn that field correctly. You need to learn the foundations of that field. Every science and every topic has a foundation knowledge. So become strong in that knowledge. And you need to be doing with these 2. If you have these 2, choose to strive in these 2. Because if you have these 2, then when your family become a bit of a problem for you, and everyone's had things that they want to do, and their family, friends, and etc. have held them back. But when you have these 2 in that field, if you have a talent in something and you have a passion for it, strive in that thing. And when your family and friends put you down, it won't bother you. And when your enemies criticize you, remain patient, because you know you're doing these things to achieve your ultimate goal, and it will be great. And towards the end, about the rewards in the hereafter, this is more for the ulama and those things. But in terms of the hereafter ones, of having an eternal life, we can see that for Imam Bukhari that's true. Because although in the worldly sense Imam Bukhari is dead, Imam Bukhari is alive through this speech. Look how his name has become immortal. His name will be here until the day of judgment, most likely. Allah knows best on that. But his name will survive. His name will go on. And then it is now, he is the legacy of the Muslims. That's what he's talking about. So when you strive to gain your goal of pleasing of Allah, and you do your actions for the sake of pleasing Allah, and you utilize these which Allah has given you, then you will become immortal, because all you're doing is sincerely for Allah to achieve that goal. And really, that's one of the main lessons of Imam Bukhari's life, is the beginning point I used, and this final point is that you need to work hard to achieve what you want in life, and you need to utilize these, because these are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is fundamentally the thing. And there's a hadith in this book of Imam Bukhari that I want to just quickly read. And I think this hadith in itself, Imam Bukhari utilized this hadith for his whole life. This whole life summed him, because if you look at the effort that he put into achieving the things that he wanted, you'll see that Imam Bukhari is fulfills this hadith. So this is it's the 962nd hadith in Al-Adab al-Mufrad, and the narrator is Jabir ibn Abdullah. He said, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed past the market on his way from a high part of the city, and the people were on both sides of him. And he passed a dead goat with both ears cut off, and he reached out and took its ear. Then he said, "Who would like to buy this for 1 dirham?" The people said, Why would we want it when it's worthless? What would we do with it? He said, "Would you like to have it?" They said, "No." He said that to them. So he asked them 3 times if they would want it, and they said, "No. By Allah, if it were alive, it would have a defect. It has no ear. So why would we want it when it's dead?" The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "By Allah, this world is less in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than this dead goat is to you." So let's say we're walking down the road now. Let's summarize this and modernize it slightly for you guys. Yeah, we're walking down the road and you're really hungry. You want a chicken burger, and then you see a chicken burger on the floor, and then someone says, "You want to buy this?" And you're like, "No, like, it's been stepped on and everything." You're like, first of all, it's not from a nice shop anyway. So we're like, we wouldn't want that one anyway. And this is all stepped on. So that's this goat here. That this goat, it didn't have ears. So it's not a goat you would want anyway. On top of that, it's dead. So how worthless is that? The way we wouldn't want that, Allah values and sees this dunya as less than that. And personally, that hadith that Imam Bukhari has collected here, I feel summarizes his life, and he understood that this dunya is worthless, and what we need to be doing is achieving that goal. So from the next sessions we'll be going through Al-Adab al-Mufrad, and we'll begin that inshaAllah. So this is the conclusion of the Imam Bukhari section. Jazakallah khairan for attentively listening, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.